because people don't yet know that they've been had. They will disagree with everything I say, but they haven't examined the documents. And that's a very pathetic situation to be in. Now, I have a few opinions or notes about things that have happened in the past 8 years that affected me working on this work all this time. And the first thing that I had to learn was not to be bitter, that I had to adjust my time vision of things to how they were and be tolerant that other people had not yet caught up with what I was seeing. That even though they didn't do the data and work, and they would say, I don't have the time that you have, I don't have the leisure, they still don't want to know what I did with that leisure to find out my statements. I have backed up everything with documents, even from the words of the commission themselves or the chief of police in Dallas. But they don't want that. They still want to go back to another world. So that even if I document it, the excuse, I don't have the time to do your work, is a lie, because they really should say, I don't have the interest to know. And I had to be very tolerant. I have to be very tolerant of people because I can see events that occur and not be afraid to look at them right as they are, like a diagnosis of a disease. And other people are going to have to wait many years to find out what happened to them, and I have to not be bitter with them. That doesn't mean I have to accept them or respect their opinion, but I have to not be bitter with them and just say, this material's here, and this is the way you handle your life, and I feel sorry for you. Don't take my time, but I feel sorry for you. If you want to come, I'll show you. But I feel sorry for you. And another thing I learned that was really a disappointment was that the intellectual class, or the liberal, does not care to know at all. He is not intelligent. And this turns you off to formal education, and it teaches you how Nazi Germany came about. The educated class do not care to know either. You could see why people who effected a change in the assassination would keep the truth from coming out. But there's no groundswell of professors of history to my house yet, and I've been on the air for 20 weeks, and there's no intellectual curiosity of members of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or the lawyers in the community, or Fulton Freeman, who worked with John Kennedy, who's the head of the Monterey Institute. These intellectual places of learning are headed by people who do not want you to usurp their position by saying that they have some responsibility for making the world any different than they just want to do it. They want their position, and they will turn off the station, or they will hang on to one thing you say and say, that's not true, therefore nothing else is true. But there are walking liberals around here that are going to work and have luncheons for campaign people, and they're going to listen to various people come through here. And I'm telling you that the people that they're going to dine and place at certain table arrangements and meet at the airport are puppets. They may as well be Geppetto carrying Pinocchio on a string. They're all a bunch of Geppettos. And they're carrying these monkeys, these candidates around. And if you show them truth, they don't want it. They want to be Geppettos, and they want to carry the little strings of their candidates and play their little roles and groom their little children, their candidates, like their own children, in their own image.
They want it the way it was, and it hasn't been that way for many, many years. And
right.
I guess they won't accept it.
They will not accept it. And then it says, then you wonder, well, what is all the education process about outside of the fact that it's to earn a living? What are you really learning, and what are you teachers really teaching the children? I am going to extend an invitation to members of the faculty of Carmel High and Monterey Peninsula College or Pacific Grove High or other schools around here to come to my home over Christmas. And if any of the teachers are listening or the students want to come with their teachers, they can write to KLRB and give me their name and address, and I will reach them, and they can come to my home, not to be brainwashed or to believe what I'm saying, but just to see how raw evidence or material is accumulated. They'll take the kids out to Schmuggers or Smuggers out in Salina to see how jelly is made and see strawberries put into jars, because that's very safe, you know. But if you say, I want to show you how your government was overthrown in 1963, that's very dangerous to put that thought into their heads, because then it requires work like Benjamin Franklin did or Thomas Jefferson. It requires giving up some of the goodies or the luxury of a good night's sleep sometimes to just work. And I learned how uninformed people are, because everyone plays the authority on different subjects. You go out to dinner parties Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, and people pass off their knowledge as if they really read a paper. And once you study any particular subject really well, like I've done the political assassinations for 8 years, you begin to gauge people's awareness about political events if they bring that subject up to you, because they'll throw out things that are totally untrue. And if they do it on that subject, they'll do it on many, many other things. Instead of saying, I have no opinion, or this is what Mark Lane says, or Mae Brussell says, they say, no, that's not true. And so I feel that most people who come to me and talk about world events and want to share an opinion about Mr. Rehnquist or Powell, who are now nominated for justices of the Supreme Court, major decisions to come up, or opinions on things that are in the news, when they bring up a subject, and I say, oh, yes, I read about it this week, they didn't read any of the articles at all. I don't know how they get their opinions, but I sit there and read the paper and cut out articles, and I'm willing to have a dialogue about it, and I find that most people are totally uninformed. They don't read, or they'll read the top of an article and never get to the bottom, and the bottom is the most interesting of all. And, in fact, apropos of the John Kennedy anniversary of his death, there was an article in the Chronicle this Sunday about the Texas Book Depository building. And this is a perfect example of my friends reading the first few paragraphs, and then when we get to the bottom of the article, they haven't read that. And the best is often at the very last. And if a subject catches your interest, it is good to just sit and read it all the way through. Many articles are of interest all the way through. And I suggest that you try that once if you want to be knowledgeable on a subject. Now, the article about the book depository was interesting. This is the beginning of the article. Quote, 8 years ago tomorrow, a sick, young, self-styled Marxist, namely Harvey Oswald, sneaked up to the 6th floor of a drab red brick building in Dallas. There he waited until 11:30 a.m. when he fired 3 rifle shots that rang around the world and took the life of President John F. Kennedy. In the years since that awful moment, there have been countless controversies about the assassination. Most of them have by now faded away. That is, all except one. And I mean the quotation there to say that, you see, they're hoping the discrepancies have faded away. And I'm quoting articles in magazines that are coming out every day that bring the issue in lawsuits, the issue very much to life, that are in the news, but they want you to think it will fade away. Now they go on to do about the Texas Book Depository. This was the building that Oswald worked in for 6 weeks before the motorcade went in front of it. It stands at the corner there where the car passed around the curve into the underpass. And after the assassination, the building was closed off. The top floor was closed off where Oswald was supposed to have been, and nobody can use that floor. And at the time that the researchers wanted to reconstruct the crime of the trajectory of the bullet, they couldn't use that floor. And when NBC News made a 4-hour television series on reconstructing this murder in order to put down Jim Garrison's case, they went to the 5th floor to duplicate the shots of Oswald, but the trajectory from the 6th floor is higher up and straighter down, which would change the course of the bullet because it was to enter in his back 5 inches below the neck and exit uphill through the Adam's apple, which is against the law of physics. But they've never been able to duplicate or try this shot either with Oswald's weapon or from the 6th floor, and nobody has been allowed up there. That's been closed off. But the book depository was open for business until about a year ago, in April 1970, when a man from Nashville, Tennessee, by the name of Aubrey Mayhew, bought the building. And he is known as a Kennedy buff. He researches the murder of John Kennedy. And he paid $650,000 for the building, and the city of Dallas was glad to have the building sold, and they thought this would end the controversy and that he would tear it down or do something with it. But now the citizens are worried about the building because they had hoped that it would be torn down, and some thought maybe it would be a museum. But it turns out that Aubrey Mayhew has a different intention for the building. What he wants to do is put a collection of 20,000 items of Kennediana, which are items pertaining to the assassination that he's collected, 20,000 items, into this building. And the Dallas people are very concerned that it would become a tourist trap. Now, they said, we have one memorial to John Kennedy, and they don't want it rubbed in that people are putting another memorial to him right at the corner where he was shot. Across from the book depository is a tourist trap which shows movies of the assassination and a shrilling voice which says, my God, they're going to kill us all. And I've been in that place across the street, and it's not really a living memorial to John Kennedy. They sell bumper stickers that say, America, love it or leave it, and all the American flags and ashtrays with Jacqueline's picture on it, and it's hardly a fitting description of a memorial. It is a real tourist trap right across the street from the book depository. But what Mr. Mayhew wants to do was that he wants to use this building to house microfilms and books and newspapers about the assassination and provide facilities for what he calls, in quotes, a continuing study of what happened here that day. In other words, Aubrey Mayhew does not think the case is closed. And if he would house his 22,000 items, like my items in my home, my 28,000 pages of original research, just cross-filing the witness testimony in the Warren Report, and my 300 books, you can imagine what he has. And if you put copies of people's research and all the books on the subject, you would begin to understand what happened in Dallas that day. Now, that isn't pleasing the Dallas people because they want to forget that anything happened at that corner, in spite of the fact that 3,000 or 4,000 people pass every single day and take pictures of the corner. And one man wanted to buy Mr. Mayhew out, so he offered him $1 million for the bricks in the building, the bricks alone, and he's turned down that. And a wax museum offered him $1 million. You know, money is no problem. You can buy Mr. Mayhew up if he can be had, because you want to tear down this living symbol to John Kennedy. And a tragedy museum offered him $100,000 just for the casings from the sixth-floor windows that Oswald was supposed to poke his rifle out. But Mr. Mayhew said, I want a continuing study of what happened here that day. Now, the people in Dallas are simply furious, and Senator Mike McCool wants funds. He brought up to the state legislature to buy the building back. He is having a fit. And he said it has tremendous historical value and it should belong to the people of Texas. And they want to tear down this building. It should be torn down. The state legislature in Texas is coming up with millions of dollars and trying to get a law to tear the building down. And they say the one thing we have to do is to remove this entire building or keep it for ourselves, because the state of Texas can come up with money to make a fitting memorial. Now, Mr. Mayhew isn't asking for money, and he doesn't care about that. He wants it as a living memorial to the memory of what happened. So then the legislature came up with another suggestion. They suggested that they leave the front of the building up and tear down the whole back of it and just leave the front standing up. What they said is that it can't be remodeled properly, and it isn't in good condition, in quotes. What you have to do basically is gut the thing and keep the exterior as it is. My personal feeling is the site is an important national landmark. This is Raymond Nasher, a Dallas developer and cultural leader. Well, Mr. Mayhew has said that over his dead body, will he let them do it? He said that he does not want them to take them from him. In quotes, they'll take it over my dead body. I will fight it with everything I have, and I'll fight it to the Supreme Court. Well, when he gets to the Supreme Court, he's going to have Mr. Powell and Mr. Rehnquist. So that's another subject. Mr. Powell is being supported by Leon Jaworski, we've mentioned this before, who represented the state of Texas for the Warren Commission, who's head of the American Bar Association. And Mr. Powell has a quotation in a paper in U.S. News this week defending the opinion of Epstein, who worked defending Oswald's position in the Warren Commission, wrote a book called Inquest, and he refers to Epstein as an authority on the killing of panthers instead of using material that computers and automation has used. Mr. Powell is heavily associated with people who would defend the Warren Report, so try and take this case to the Supreme Court.
You're listening to Dialogue Assassination with Mae Brussell. This is KLRB, Carmel.
when I look at all the accumulation of Kennedy material that I have in my home,